Andersen, can you come up to the front? Those of you that are going to be speakers tonight, you can sit near the front. I've been told by Bonnie Madison that 7:30 we begin the program, and do we have it? No? Actually, well, I don't know. I'll read off the names and people can raise their hand. The only people I haven't seen is Howard Hubbard here. Is Carl Main here? Okay, there you are. Okay. Well, you're going to be one of the first people to speak, so are you ready? Okay. It's my privilege to introduce, first of all, the president of Shoreline Community College, Gary Ortman.
Good evening and welcome to this fun, exciting evening. My understanding, I have 30 seconds or less, or there's a gong, and there truly is a gong here, I believe, tonight. I would like all of you to stand, and we'll have a toast to Julian this evening. So if everyone please stand up. I would like to propose a toast to a great instructor and professor who touched thousands and thousands of lives as a great faculty member, who also touched thousands and thousands of lives to students indirectly by helping faculty, by helping classify, by helping administrators in becoming computer illiterate. And the many, many things that Julian has done to make this fine community college what it is today. Here's a fine toast to a fine professional educator, Julian Andersen. Julian, here's to you.
Amen.
The second person that I want to introduce is Bonnie Madison, who coordinated all kinds of activities and all kinds of people to get this program together. And oh, she did. Okay. There was some concern about a week ago that, you know, maybe we only had about 4 people, you know, that had signed up for this, and Bonnie was getting desperate, and she sent out email messages telling all faculty and staff that they would get new computers next quarter if they came to the party. So it worked.
It worked, didn't it?
Bonnie did not give me a list of all the names of all the people that have been involved in this planning, but you can look around the room and see all the people that are working, and you saw people when you came in. You can look around and see all the decorations that were done, and all the work to get the word out and everything else. So I think we should have a round of applause to indicate our appreciation for all of that. My name is John James. I'm a librarian, as they say. Low tech. I found that out when I went to Green River Community College last week, and was told that we don't have to have books anymore and things like that. But we won't get into that. I think I was chosen partly because I've known Julian Andersen for some time, and I'm only going to just talk about the Julian Andersen that that existed, I should say, before he came to Shoreline Community College. We had lunch last Monday at one of Julian's favorite chic restaurants, the 74th Avenue Ale House. I took notes, and my notes are better at the beginning. And then near the end, I think I began to forget things and make mistakes. So I can't say that this is all going to be accurate. By the way, I also want to mention for people that are coming later as speakers, Ken LaFontaine has the Bruce Abbey horn, I believe. And so he's going to start his watch whenever you start speaking. Now, that doesn't apply to me, Ken, if you understand. I'm introducing people, so this doesn't count. But I'm revealing the secrets of this gentleman to my right, because a lot of us don't know a lot about him before he came to Shoreline Community College. And there really isn't a lot to say. I mean, it's not really all that interesting. And actually, as a lot of you know, after he came to Shoreline, it wasn't that interesting either. But nevertheless, Julian Lee Andersen was born April 5th, 1942. It's incredible, isn't it? I get the truth. Just give him a few ales and he starts talking. Minneapolis, Minnesota, son of Elmer and Eleanor. Has a brother, Tony, lives in St. Paul, and sister lives in Duluth. Came from a solid Republican family. And I think this is being filmed, isn't it, for your families back in Minnesota? So well, they might want to know you're no longer a Republican. They see you, but they see you with your beard, and I think maybe they figured that out a couple of decades ago. But nevertheless, since they'll be seeing this later, a couple of other Republican credentials that may be of surprise to you. Julian's father was a state senator for a long period of time in Minnesota, and actually served as governor of Minnesota from 1960 to 1963. And so the Julian that we know today may not have been the Julian of the 1950s. I mean, he might have had a crew cut. Who knows? I'm pretty sure he didn't have a beard. Nevertheless, he did tell me about some of his activities in school. He graduated from Gutterson Elementary School in St. Paul, went to Murray High School, graduated in 1960. He was a fairly normal person in high school, from what I could tell. He was on the track team, he did cross country. But there was one strange club that he told me he was very active in. He was active in the library club. And, I wasn't even active in the library club when I was in high school. So, yeah. And maybe this was kind of a precursor of nerdish tendencies that came out later. I don't know. If you can't have a library, you've got to have a computer. He was also, interestingly enough, his father gave him a chemistry set, I guess, but he told me he was also experimenting with explosives. So I'm not sure that Republican background quite took. I don't know. He also told me that he talked to his father through vacuum tubes. Now, I'm not quite sure what that meant. At first I thought it was some kind of vacuum tube technology before the digital age, and he reassured me it was something else, but kind of like talking through vacuum cleaner hoses or something, I'm not sure. Eventually, He did work his way through high school. He didn't mention his social life in high school, so I can only assume that he didn't have one. But things did improve in college, and we'll get to that in a minute. Julian went to Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota. By the way, the motto of the town was cows, colleges, and contentment, which might give you an idea of what his social life was like. And at Carleton College, he earned a degree in math and also in music, and he played the oboe, was in the chamber music group, and he was very insistent I make sure that it was an English horn, not a French horn that he played. I don't know what that means. And and also he did become more interested in politics because he was quite impressed with the Port Huron statement of the SDS, Students for Democratic Society.
Yes!
Ah, yes, Ken, the only person in the audience that knows what that's about. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Okay, a couple of other things. His social life did improve in college because he told me there was an arboretum, and in the arboretum a lot of people would get together and socialize. Now, he insisted that there was nothing grown in the arboretum in that time period that would have been dangerous or illegal. So if his folks are watching this videotape, I want to reassure them that this was before those things supposedly were happening. Then he went to Wesleyan University to earn his master's degree, and during the summer he got involved in politics because this was in the 1960s, and this was before the passage of civil rights legislation. Julian went to South Carolina to involve himself in the registration of black voters in South Carolina. The following... More people know about that in the SDS, and I'm glad. The following summer, Julian went to an all-black college in North Carolina to teach mathematics. So he was showing a certain kind of social commitment in those very early days before he came to Shoreline, and something that we're familiar with to this day about Julian. Then he finally did graduate from, actually did quite well. He was one of the few people that I know that went through college in 4 years, got a degree, and then went through graduate school in 2 and got a degree. Now people go 16 years and then they go back and they change their careers and do all kinds of things. It took me longer, by the way, Julian, but you know, that's not surprising. Now, I mentioned earlier that he did practice making explosives when he was in high school, and he did have this SDS connection later. And then when he came to Seattle, he did decide he wanted to take a job working at the Monroe Reformatory, teaching, well, he says he taught mathematics, I don't know, but he did teach in the high school program there, again revealing a certain kind of social commitment. And then, for some strange reason that he may explain later, he applied for a job at Shoreline Community College. And this is where my part of the story stops. He told me he was interviewed by Ed Tronson and Ward Teal. And at this point, I'm going to stop and ask Mr. Carl Main to come up here and tell us what was going on in the world and what it was like meeting this person from Minnesota that had this SDS connection and all these other things. So we'll start.
I didn't know all about that. Julian and I both started teaching math here at Shoreline the same year. Actually, there were 2 others that started the same year, Judy Sanderman and Howard Hubbard. Judy's retired. Julian's retired. I don't know if there's a message here for the rest of us or not. I actually have just 2 or 3 remembrances to share with you, and then a wish and a request. With the first year that we were here, Julian was my office mate. And we shared an office in room 1404, which currently is the Math Learning Center. And I still go into that place and look over there. And remember how they had those walls set up, about so high? And the whole room was just filled with offices, and Julian and I shared one of those little booths together. Sometime later, we also shared teaching responsibilities. I think we went and checked back today, and I think it was back in '82. We taught a computer science class together. The team taught that. And we were working with, I think the language was Pascal, and the machine was Apple IIs. Times certainly have changed since then, but that was really a great time we had together. What I have gotten from Julian over the years is just tremendous in terms of support and in terms of encouragement to get involved with technology. And I think this would be a fine opportunity for me to thank you publicly, Julian, for all the help and the support and the great times that we've had together over the years. It's just really just been wonderful, I think. I would drop into his office on occasion, and we would have little technical discussions about things that were not working, either with the network or with software or hardware. But each time I had any kind of a problem, I knew where to go, and Julian's office was always open, and I appreciate that. The impact that it's had in terms of what I'm able to do as a faculty member, what Julian has contributed, has just really been really great. Our access to the world through internet, the web, and all those things have been certainly facilitated, not only of course, by what Julian has done, but by what a lot of people have done. But he's certainly been a leader in this area. So those are just some reminiscences that I've had over the years about Julian. I have a wish to express and a request for him. The wish is I wish for him the very best in the future, and our hearts go with you. And the request is, be sure to come back and say howdy.
We had Howard Hubbard on the program, and I don't see him. Is he here? Okay. We'll go on. As we move on in the golden age of Julian Andersen, and by the way, the last name is always spelled with an E at the end. You know, I've been hearing that for 20 years. That's boring, Julian. I mean, okay. Your family was prominent in Minnesota, but they didn't make the pea soup, right? Okay, forget about it. Now, the next person I wanted to introduce, and I don't know if he's here because he's a friend of Julian's and he has something to do with darts. Is Steve Fisher here? Okay, come on up, Steve. Steve came here on the recommendation of Julian, so who knows what's going to happen next. When I talked to Steve on the phone, I said, well, you know, there are going to be some people that are going to probably make fun of Julian and so on. He said, oh, and Julian's such a wonderful person. You know, I figured, well, he doesn't know him very well. But nevertheless, here's Steve, and he will have a few things to say.
I flunked my speech course at Shoreline. So this is my second try. Anyway, I was a student at Shoreline 74, 75. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Julian, because I owe him all of my success in life and my ability in math, as I did not have a math class with Julian. For this, I'm grateful. I met Julian through hiking, where he and Lloyd Keith were in charge of the hiking expeditions. They went completely out of their way to fit in with the students, as they were advanced in their age. They were in their early 30s, and they were quite old to all of us. So they were determined to look like liberals, and completely hid the fact that they were in charge of our safety and liable for any mishaps. And Julian, I want to thank you for your example. Times have changed since the long hair and the music. I have some pictures you guys might want to look at. The obsession with breaking rules, the intense interpersonal communications, the sleeping bags, the gossip, the broken hearts. We used the school vans for our hiking trips. And so with great pride and a tribute to our learning experience that in all of these trips to the mountains, we never once wrecked the school van. And this legacy we owe to Julian. Many of our trips were in the winter snow, snowshoeing and camping in the snow, and we were never once caught in an avalanche. This we owe to Julian. Yeah, just a second.
Visual aids for you, Julian.
Julian once forgot the toilet paper, so I thought... Now, having been on many trails and sometimes hiking off the trail just for the hell of it, no one ever got lost more than a few hours. This we also owe to Julian. I have a compass for Julian. Although Lloyd Keith made all the decisions, it was Julian who would step in and wisely stop the bad ones. Julian is known for his occasional, once in a while, assertiveness. He never really had a strong opinion until he had something to disagree with. And this we used to call wisdom. Many times I would show up after driving for 4 or 5 hours for a hiking trip in the snow and realize I didn't have my boots. These are my usual boots. Tennis shoes in the snow. It can be done. Okay, because of his wisdom and charm, Julian was known as Gandalf. Symbolic of his long hair, his weird-looking beard, his willingness to kiss the Reverend Sunseed. Julian gave me a book once called Mount Analog, and the book compares the challenges of life to the climbing of mountains. And the book talks of climbers who particularly enjoy the ascension of the mountain versus those who prefer the exhilaration of the descent. Julian shared with me that he was in a minority of climbers that like to climb down better than to climb up. So at this stage of Julian's life, he should be pretty happy. But I must share with you now something you might not know. The real reason Julian's leaving Shoreline is he's become involved in politics again. And after much arguing with me, I finally convinced him that megathymia is wrong, and we need a stadium for the Mariners and the Seahawks. Paul Allen wanted me to give this to Julian. And that's from Ayasaki, or whatever his name is. Now, it's no coincidence that Julian would retire so soon after President Clinton visited Shoreline Community College. He's confided in me his desire to run for office in the year 2000. Julian wants to put his beanbag chair in the Oval Office. He wants to tear down the bridge to the 21st century and swim across. Just the other day, Julian asked me to have coffee with him, an obvious attempt to get money. With Andersen as president, we can expect the following improvements: a different operating system in every home, consistently different ways of looking at things, consistent, and hockey will be declared the national pastime. So Shoreline loses a great administrator, a negotiator, a truly unusual person who plays a mean game of pool with an average ability to drink beer. But America is the real winner. We say goodbye to Julian Andersen. From Shoreline, hello, Mr. President. The next President of the United States, Julian Andersen. We also have from the Mariners a little Mariner piggy bank. Thank you.
Who wants that? Okay. We've had the excitement of hearing the math story and the mountain climbing story, but we're not finished because there's one more mountain climber. One of our more distinguished professors, Professor of Canadian History, Lloyd Keith. Takes him a while.
Steve, I think that we can get a petition and get that speech grade changed. The one good thing about Julian Andersen's retirement is that I no longer have to stop in the middle of campus and to engage in conversation with someone who wants to know something about computers. And so not to disappoint them, I give them some story. We're constantly being confused, but perhaps that explains some of the breakdowns we had with administrative computing in the past. I'm not sure. By the way, Steve, Julian was at least nearly caught in an avalanche one time. Our colleague over there, Donald Jones, will remember the time that Julian told us that, yes, this route is perfectly safe. There's no problem. Let's proceed in this direction. And so we did. And not long, 100 yards, 200 yards, we saw a hand coming up out of the snow. That's odd. What a place to dig a snow cave. Then a bit further, we see somebody with their pack sticking up through the snow. And it, of course, happened that they were covered by an avalanche, and if it wasn't for his acumen, shall we say, about safe routes, they probably would still be there. But we did rescue them, did we not? I don't know where you got all of that information at the 74th Street pub house, but I remember Julian when he was released from prison. And because Shoreline in those days was run by a president with a liberal orientation, we had a second chance program. And Julian was the beneficiary of that. I was too. I was a 3-time loser myself. I'd just gotten out of prison, but hadn't met Julian at that time. I probably have known him as long, if not longer, than most people here. I even remember, not apocryphally, but remember when he was a teacher. I remember him teaching. He actually did that. In fact, he had a fantastic mind. He did? It was the president before you. He knew and taught students about ordinal scales. He could do that. Some things were worth more than other things were worth. In those days, he could do it. He could string numbers together. I mean, he could even count beyond 10 in those days, and he did it. I mean, can you imagine on these hiking trips with Steve Fisher and Don Jones, many of the rest of us, and he's counting. Or he tells us a joke, 37, and we're supposed to laugh at it, as though we remember which one of those that it was. But Don Jones would like to talk about serious things like educational objectives, and on my one side, and then on the other side. Can you imagine me snowed in with these two? And on my other side, this guy talking about base this, base that. Base 10. What's so great about base 10? So we got into that one time, and I agreed with him. It's not so hot. God didn't make the world in 10 days. And so we invented our own base number, 16 and a half. That was his doing. I invented the word. It's called hectorod. Figure it out. It is base 16 and a half. And to this day, we both still participate more or less in an event that celebrates the hectorod.
Much less.
But he used to be quite excellent at mathematical computations until he became ambitious in his mountain climbing endeavors. He was, by the way, very well known for taking shortcuts. I think Steve Fisher may have alluded to this. And this led to the one time, I hate to tell you this, I know I'm probably letting you know some things about him that you've never really known before. He was in prison. And we slept together. It's true. We've slept together. Intimately. It all started with Julian's shortcut. We had a program, we've not gone very far in it yet, but we still haven't given it up. And that's to climb to the roof of all the states. And we were climbing to the roof of Montana. It was a handsome peak, but not exceptionally difficult. Some enterprising mountaineer had even painted some of the rocks yellow so we could find our way up. I was quite willing to follow the yellow painted rocks on the way up. But Julian said, no, let's take this shortcut over to the right. The next thing, that happens with this other guy too that I slept with. But this is a story about him. I'll get him on his retirement too. The next thing I do is I find myself without a rope, hanging by my fingernails and toenails on the side of a cliff, inching along, and he says, well, we can make it, it's not so bad. And 2 hours later, we did survive, we did make it, but the sun is getting low in the sky, and we still haven't got to the summit. So we gotta get to the summit. When we get to the summit, I gotta tell this, and then I'll leave. I gotta tell how we slept together. And it was a beautiful summit. We finally made it. The sun was going down, and then it occurred to us we had to get back. But it was dusk, and the route back required some rappels, and it was so dark that we decided we better stay on the mountain. Didn't have packs, and we fixed ourselves a little area with a little rock wall, and but we didn't have sleeping bags, didn't have pads. We had each other, and it got cold. And all inhibitions left us. I got to finish quickly, but his mind went after that. He could no longer count past one, and he babbled. 0, 1, 0, 1. And I suspect that's when the administration put him into computers.
Well, there's more story to tell. And this is just the beginning. Thank you, distinguished, hopefully soon-to-be emeriti professor. We haven't yet got into the labor story of Julian Andersen. I remember when I arrived at Shoreline in 1975, someone had warned me about this dangerous radical that was on the campus that would demonstrate at the community colleges when they had strikes and so on and so forth. Little did I know that it was actually Julian Andersen. So later, when John Backus and I were doing research for the 25th anniversary of Shoreline Community College, we were doing indexing of the college newspaper, and we indeed saw a picture on the front page of Julian carrying a sign. Now, that might have been the only time he ever did it, I don't know, but nevertheless, he had this exalted reputation as a labor leader, and later he was involved in some interesting negotiations for the faculty vis-a-vis the administration. And so, to tell that part of the story, I'd like to introduce certainly a legend here, Burton V. Weston III.
Yeah, my association with Julian began with the union. As many of you know, I've off and on been president of the union more than I would like to think about. And Julian and I went through several negotiations, and I believe to this day the administration took him away to get him off the negotiating table. So I do have a couple of negotiation stories about Julian that I remember. Interesting. Many of you may not remember, but early on in negotiations, there used to always be a story about a faculty member who held an entire second job. And whenever negotiations would turn toward workload and class size limits and anything along those lines, Jim Connor would bring up this faculty member who held this second job. For those of you who don't know, it was Les Borgstrom, who had been the bridge tender in Ballard long before he ever came to work at Shoreline. So, in one negotiations, Julian came to my office one day and he said, "I'm tired of hearing this story about the faculty member who has the second job. I want to put this to rest." I said, "Okay." He said, "You want to know what I'm going to do?" I said, "No." He said, "You want to come watch?" "Oh, yeah." Oh, yeah. Well, when Julian ran a negotiation, it was wonderful to watch because he was the commensurate professional. Cool, collected, never raised his voice, never showed any anger, listened intently to all sides. So the next day, we knew we were going to be in this area of negotiations, some kind of workload. And so I went. I was the president of the union. Julian was my negotiator. And we waited, and sure enough, Connor made the comment about the faculty member with the second job. Julian abruptly stood up, so his chair fell over backwards. He leaned on the table, and he leaned across at Connor's, and he said in a very angry, loud voice, "Yes, and if faculty members were paid appropriately so that they could feed their families, they wouldn't have to work a second job." And we never heard about the faculty member with the second job again. I think you were there, Ron. The second negotiation story I have that I think is even funnier. Right at the very beginning of one negotiations, Julian handed Jim a folded piece of paper. And Jim opened it and he looked at it, and what Julian had written on the paper was collective bargaining agreement between Community College District Number 7 and Shoreline Community College Federation of Teachers Local 1950. Article 1, you say jump, we say how high. Connor looked at her a bit, didn't even break a smile, and he said, "Well, with a couple of word changes, I think we can live with this." Set an interesting tone for the negotiations. Carl talked about being in the 1400 building. I was in that building too, Carl. Yeah, I remember those times. That was fun up there. But I do want to say seriously that I really appreciated Julian and all the work he did, because when you're the president of the Federation, there's an awful lot of work to do, and negotiations is a very tough thing. And I always knew when Julian took it on that I was not going to have to hurt it, I was not going to have to watch over it, because he was going to do the job. So, Julian, for all your work for the union, thank you very much. Onto that jacket with a vote of the people. That may become a collector's item yet.
By the way, Sharon is retiring, or at least she said she wasn't going to be running for re-election, so the job is open again for the president of the union. We need to talk about technology, because somewhere along the line, Julian became interested in computers. And an administrator at a higher level decided that Julian should be working under someone who knew even more about computers than he did. Someone that was as technologically advanced in the world of computers and so on. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce the Dean of Computer Technology at Shoreline Community College, Mr. Francis Clowers.
While I'm getting my notes unwrapped here, I've also gone on some of those mountain outings, Steve, and they were indeed memorable occasions. I went one time on a snowshoe hike in the middle of the winter from Mission Ridge to Blue Wood Pass, and it was in January. And we did get, the first thing, we went up to Mission Ridge and spent the night there. And the next morning, I was preparing breakfast, and there were Julian and another person were in my tent with me, watching every move I made, putting gas in the stove and all that. And when I struck the match, it went poof, and the whole front of the tent caught on fire. And it burned the entire front end of my tent out. And the people in the next tent heard us yelling and came and ripped it open. And then the second night, we had gotten to the midway point where we were meeting another party. We had two college fans again, meeting another party, and you could easily go like this, you know, but we linked up, And that, I'm always grateful for that experience, and that was Gil Gonzalez-led party. Because it was like going back into one of those fabulous meetings at Jackson Hole between the Indian tribes and the traders, you know, where everybody got stoned out of their mind and so forth. Well, that night I decided to bunk with Gil in his tent, and I loaned my tent to Julian and somebody else. And that night we had a windstorm and it blew the tent down on top of them. And they were so disgusted and tired at that point that they just slept through it anyways. Julian has always been willing to stop and chat for a few minutes anytime we saw each other. On the campus, this was one of the aspects of his personality that I really appreciated about him over the 30 years we have been associated. Whenever we would talk, I always felt as though I had Julian's full attention. He was fully engaged in talking with me at that moment. I can recall some of those chats that first occurred in the late 1960s, and I do not recall that Julian ever seemed to grow older as we continued our relationship over all these years. Sometimes I wonder if he does not grow older because in a closet somewhere in that lovely house of his, there is a portrait locked away of a very old and bent Julian Andersen. Possibility. You know, the picture of Julian A. I was quick to recognize while talking any time with Julian that this was one very smart dude. It was these qualities in Julian that caused me to enlist him to work together with me and others in the building and managing of a support program for instructional computing at Shoreline. The year was early 1982. Dr. Ron Bell had become our president the previous July of '81. The technology of desktop computing was advancing rapidly, and Dr. Bell agreed with my proposal to consolidate a computing support organization under the Library Media Center. One of the very first things I did was to ask Julian if he would work with us. He had recently spent a sabbatical year at Western Washington University improving his knowledge of computing. Julian was at that time a professor of mathematics at Shoreline, as Lloyd has already explained. So I succeeded at first in getting a third of his time, and then I think a year later I got 2/3, and eventually I got all of his time. And he came to work under the umbrella of the Library Media Center. About this same period, in the early to mid-1980s, the CTC changed its strategy and policy and moved into what they call distributed computing. And from its beginning in 1978 to about 1984-85, they had served the system with two mainframe computers located at their headquarters in Redmond. With distributed computing, Shoreline acquired its very own HP 3000, and administrative computing took on a life of its own at Shoreline. Eventually, by 1987, Julian and I agreed that it would be best if we divided into two organizations, if we got a divorce, in other words. Julian became Director of Administrative Computing at that time. It was the convention to separate administrative computing from instructional computing at that time, and never to commingle the sets of data on the same processor. That's why we had two organizations for so many years. And so for the past 10 years, Julian and I have partnered as fellow administrators in managing the technology and services that we have all come to love and expect. We had to decide and agree on who does what, though, because we had two organizations. Try to make it a little less confusing to know who you should call when you wanted help. We had to decide on that. There were some days when Julian and I behaved like two dogs, each snarling over the same piece of fresh meat, though I was doing most of the snarling. We worked out an agreement, we negotiated an agreement, that's his union background, which I quickly came to identify with now this is going to go over your head, I think, for the next few sentences. I identified, I called it the Treaty of Tordesillas. That was a treaty signed in 1494 between Spain and Portugal, with the Pope playing a role as arbiter. In essence, the Treaty of Tordesillas divided the Western Hemisphere between the two nations of Spain and Portugal. I thought the analogy of this treaty to be on a scale of grandiosity fitting the respective ambitions and keen sense of territoriality characteristic of Julian and Francis. In the real Treaty of Tordesillas, the line of demarcation was moved 270 leagues further west, Portugal to have the exclusive rights to all lands to the east of it, and Spain of all lands to the west. The making of this treaty is not entirely clear, and it has often been used as an argument to prove that Portugal already knew of Brazil, which by the treaty was brought into the Portuguese sphere. Now, I think that I will leave to the future generations at Shoreline the task of fully understanding this piece of very deep trivia and figure out which of us was Spain and which of us was Portugal, and who the Pope figure was on our campus. I always knew that Julian was a lot smarter than I am, and I was always happy to yield to his superior knowledge and understanding on many technical matters, counter to what John James was saying, that I taught him everything he knows. We all know that's not true. So Julian still looks like a young man. I wish him the best throughout the rest of his young life. One other thing about Julian, I never met a guy that could wear a sweater or a pair of shoes or a cap so long, and they never seemed to wear out.
Is someone helping him to his chair? This is real late for Francis, so we appreciate the fact that he stayed up, and we'll get to the Pope in a minute. The Pope, by the way, happens to be of Italian ancestry, surprise. Not the present Pope, of course. And, thank you for the history lesson and so on. We appreciated it. There was someone who obviously must have realized that Julian had some special quality in terms of technology and interest in computers. This person is no longer employed by Shoreline Community College, and contrary to rumor on campus, he's not shining shoes on 2nd Avenue. I do think that he had a special commitment to technology and computers, because that seemed to be all that we were spending money on during that period, plus the auto tech program. But nevertheless, we were certainly, I think, in the vanguard, and a lot of you that are here tonight were hired originally during that time period when we had the great growth spurt and the introduction of this new technology. I was going to do a little Nixon channeling, say things such as, "Just remember, you were the president and they can never take that away from you." But just remember, Julian was never a communist. But I won't say those things. This, at that time, young man in the 1980s, in some way referred to as the Pope, and maybe that's not an inappropriate thing to say, felt so highly of Julian that he did reorganize the administration building, and the vice president's office that was next to his kind of disappeared, and then all of these computer people came in, and then there was a great remodeling. We're not familiar with remodeling at Shoreline, are we, and moving people around, right? Then there was a special office for Julian He had his own office, and however, and by the way, Julian by this time was officially an administrator, but unlike every other administrator at Shoreline Community College, with the possible exception of Francis Clowers and perhaps the head of the science division, he would not wear a coat and tie. So, I don't know, I'm telling you something right there. I think that the person designated as the Pope probably had the right idea, because he did bring somebody into the administration building who did know a lot about computers and technology, and a lot of very good people were hired. And then also during that time period, of course, I must say there were some very good people hired by Francis Clowers, and some of those people are here. And now, supposedly, they're all merging into one happy group, and they're roaming all over the campus trying to find the best place where they can all be together. Displace just about everybody else on the entire. They've been driving everybody nuts on campus since last summer. The vice president, one of the vice presidents sitting over there, still hasn't figured out where they're going to go. And who knows? They may all just end up squeezed into that room next to the president. But I kind of doubt it. I don't know what's going on. We certainly need another building. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the former president of Shoreline Community College, Ronald E. Bell.
Donna asked me. You wanted to do that. Donna asked me, she said, the guy who's going to do this, John James, is he really, you know, is he funny? I said, you wait. Also, John called and said, are you going to be able to make it? And I said, I would not miss this no matter what. Couple answers. Why did the hat and the shirt and everything stay so you know, unused? It's because he never washed them. Let me just begin and be brief, and it goes like this. I figured out early on I was the first full-time, part-time faculty member in the math department, so I saw them all. And when Julian came in, I finally figured out very quickly what he was going to do. His goal in life was to drive certain people crazy on this campus. So he started with the head of the math department, Gordon Roberts, proceeded to the division chairs, won't mention any names, presidents, Dick White. I was his assistant after a while, and he said, Ron, you keep saying Julian's really bright. And I never could convince him of that until he finally married Jamie. And it's the smartest thing he ever did. So we verified that belief with Jamie and his wonderful family. I've really been fortunate to work with this guy for nearly, 28 years? Quite a few. Always respected him from the day I met him, with the fact that he really is bright and he does have a fine mind, and he also is very committed. As a faculty member, what I remember about Julian was the fact that he never gave up on any student, not one. He would work with every student and just work until they were in some way successful. But since I recognized that he usually was very capable of driving presidents nuts, or the president at the time, also recognizing that we really had a need for a guy with this vision, because that's really what Julian's always had, a lot of vision, that we needed someone with vision about where this technology was going. And so I said, Julian, hey, what about it? And honestly, we always had this working relationship that was always the same. We were always open with each other. He would tell me what he thought about what I was doing. I would always ask him what he was doing. Because he was always way ahead of all of us. And I have to tell you that I never had any problem trusting him. He'd come in with a recommendation, I'd look at it, and I'd say, you can't have $3 million. But prioritize it, I'll go down and draw a line, and you'll assure me that you'll stay faithful to that and you'll make sure it happens. And that's the way we work, right? Always. During negotiations, you know, I've been on both sides of that negotiations table, and I do remember him doing that thing about less, and I was waiting till somebody was going to do that. I always enjoyed negotiations, but on both sides of the table. And I have to tell you, I enjoyed it in the sense that I always saw it done in a professional fashion, and it may have taken a long time sometimes, but because of the people involved and when Julian was doing it, I knew he was working for what he believed was right, and he was going to compromise. When I did ask him to join the administration, I have to be honest with you, I was concerned that we were going to really lose a good negotiator on, quote, the other side. During the negotiations when he was an administrator, sometimes I could tell it took everything he had just to not say anything. He would sit there and his fingers would just be grabbing at the desk. And he'd say, I know he'd want to take me and throw me across the room, but I would sit with Julian and we'd talk about where things were going and why. And he was always, again, straightforward and honest. So, as a faculty member, the greatest respect. As a teacher with students, admiration. As an administrator, just the best you can have. Loyal, always told you where things were. And as a personal friend, it's always been a joy to watch Julian not age. I did see him once when he took his beard and mustache off, and we all screamed, "Put it back on." What a joy it was when he did have Jamie join him, and what a wonderful family. So, can I say simply, retirement's wonderful, enjoy it, and very best to the both of you.
Now let me tell you the real reason that this fellow was in the administration building. Ron needed somebody to help him run his computer. Let's get real here, okay? We have Bonnie Madison next, and I don't know exactly what Bonnie wants to say, but this is kind of a representation of all the people who presently, or should say, not present, well, used to work for the gentleman to my right. So, Bonnie?
Anyway, we have, like these three students, we all have a little something to say about Julian. So, Gary being the youngest of the group.
Thank you.
He'll go first with his little anecdote.
One of the first things I was told when I started working at Shoreline was don't mess with any of administrative computing stuff. This, of course, was one of the first things I did as an instructional technician at North Shore Center. The faculty computer at North Shore Center was outfitted with a monochrome monitor and was short of memory, but otherwise adequate to run Windows. But what really caught my eye was a laser printer attached to it. I thought I would simply switch monitors with my file server and put a network card in it. Then I can print to it from any machine on the network. One problem. I needed some proprietary HP software. So I called Administrative Computing and told them what I had done and asked if they could please send out an expanded memory manager for the HP machine. Julian wanted to meet me right away. That was not a good thing, I was told. I had a good meeting with Julian. He was excited about the networking technology that I was working on, and he was fine with the parts I had donated from instructional computing. But insisted that I return the monitor listed in his inventory to the administrative machine. How peculiar, I thought. I had given him a color monitor and he wanted that ugly monitor back. This incident I would ponder until recently, when I discovered why Julian insisted on keeping that awful monitor. It was not, in fact, Julian's decision. He was doing what the database on his Macintosh told him to do. I know now why those computer service reports kept bouncing back. Please add serial number. And I need a state tag number. It was that damn Macintosh. Julian is an extremely together person. And always has been ever since I met him that day at North Shore Center. With the exception of one day back in October. I was sitting in the administrative computing office area when Julian came in. I just started to discuss with him the day's activities through the wall, but Julian did not respond. In all the years that I'd worked with Julian, he always had time to listen and always seemed to pay attention. But he was there zipping around the office like in a zombie-like state. Then I realized Linda had finally swapped in Julian's new computer that day, but somehow the database was not working on the computer. Julian was frantically running around trying to bring his Frankenstein monster back to life. It's still there. It's all we can do to get it to go to the next screen. It still runs the department as it always has. But it's been great working with Julian, and we'll miss him.
Now, the middle child of this group, Linda Mickleberry. Middle child's the best. First time I met Julian was when I was in personnel, and this guy walks in, and he's got a ponytail down to here. For those of you who are new here, I mean, it's down there. It's really neat. I thought, wow. And somebody walks in and says, hey, there's a whole bunch of students sitting out in the hall. And Julian goes, finally! And he ran out the door. And I thought, okay, this is somebody I want to work with. Okay, I'm not too good at speeches, but I did learn something about teaching. I bring visual aids. So, I'm going to tell you kind of what it's like to work for Julian. The shirt. Julian got one of these for each of us on Bonnie's birthday. That says to me that this is a boss that understands the stress of working in administrative computing. I mean, he understands, so sure. Book. Second shift. He went out and bought this book and read it. This tells me of the boss who understands our lives. I mean, Bonnie and I, Gary too now, we work 8 hours here, and then we go home and we're mothers and fathers and husbands and wives. He understood this, or at least he was trying to understand it. Cup. For those of you who don't know, I entered my second childhood when I was 38 years old and started ice skating. He didn't know this when I first started. And I came in one day, I started skating, you know, and I would do it on my lunch hours and everything. And I came in one day and I said, Julian, do you mind if I take 2-hour lunches 2 days a week? He didn't ask me why. He just said, no, we can work that out. We'll work out your schedule. And I'm sure he thought I was seeing a counselor. Because 2 weeks later, he came and he goes, how are those 2-hour lunches working? I said, just fine. They're working just fine. I finally had to tell him the truth when I fell on my chin and broke my jaw and had 26 stitches on Monday. But this is a cup that Julian and Jamie gave me for Christmas a few years back. If you notice, that's the figure skating from the Lillehammer Olympics. This shows me a boss who understands that our passions and our loves that we have outside of work. You don't find many bosses like that. Not only that, he's the only boss I've ever been able to say, go away, I can't look at you right now. Hey, I mean, how many bosses do you see like that? Having Julian as a boss made our jobs more than just jobs. He encourages us to learn more and to stretch into horizons that really appeal to us. Working for Julian was working for a friend. I miss having my friend around. Have a great retirement, Julian, and may you always quest for new trails.
I'm the oldest. I started working for Julian back in 1987. Yeah, that would be right. 87. And I walked in, there was a computer, a box of paper, a tape, and a pencil. I said, where's my chair? I interviewed with Mr. Clowers and Julian. I came in, I had my best linen summer suit on. It was hot August, I was sweating like a pig. Just finished college, I gotta get a job, because I want to buy a house. So I walk in to do this interview, and there's Julian with his sandals, no socks, shorts, and shirt. And Mr. Clowers with his, his Filipino linen shirt, looking just as cool as could be. Outstanding. And there they're interviewing me, and I got stockings on, pantyhose, just God. Okay, all right. Well, I got a call saying, you got the job. Fine. I was happy, got my first check. I cried. Stupid me didn't negotiate a salary. Oh well. Okay, I like college environments. I was always a sucker for this place, so I said, well, I've got to start building my tent. I've been a wife of a Navy sailor for 22 years. I've got to build my tent. And meeting Julian and rest of the crew on this ship of Shoreline, I said, this is where I want to put my bunk at. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to build my tent from. And having a boss like Julian has really been a great experience, and he touches everybody. He has made this step into the 21st century going to happen a lot easier for all of us. I want to say thank you, boss. I want to say thank you, Jamie, because without you, he would drive us crazy. Literally. I'd send her thank you notes. Thank you. Again, thank you, boss. We love you very much. You take care, bro. Oh, one more thing. John Bailey from Seattle Community College wanted me to let you know he's still not convinced that Apple computers are a real computer. We'd like to present Julian with a few gifts from Shoreline Community College. Mark, our student helper, went around the campus and took pictures of a lot of people on this campus that you'll be familiar with, and was able to put a nice little album together. And he put it on what we call our CSRs, these pieces of paper for customer service requests that would always come back to us. We hide them, like, when you're a kid, hide those dirty socks under your bed. We've got some of those. We also have a gift certificate here from REI to help you find those trails and not kill your fellow climbers. Get you a good compass. Big box here. Wait, so everybody can see this one. Oh, this one. They call this a trail vest. Yeah. So, you can put all kinds of stuff. We've already put some stuff in there. We got all kinds of stuff in there. I went down to Microcomputer, which is a Macintosh repair dealer down there in Linwood, and they put a little pin on that that says Apple Expert. And they don't give that out to only their people who are certified technicians, so he's got that on his computer. I also like to present you with another gift certificate for event tickets of your choice. I mean, anytime you want to go, that's for you, so that, you know, you need those hockey tickets next month? Yeah, we can go get those now. Again, Julian, I'd like to say thank you from my heart and from the Shoreline heart, you know, that, hey, you've done a wonderful job. Come a long way from one box, one computer, and 4 dumb PCs.
We have 2 more parts of the program. We're going to hear from Julian Andersen in a minute. And after that, we have some surprise guests that will be arriving right after his response to the people who have been up here talking about his life, and also perhaps to a lot of you in the audience. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and let's now hear from Julian.
Well, nothing could be finer than an evening like this for me at Shoreline. The friendship of each one of you means a great deal to me. The friendship at the college, in a much wider circle than this, means a great deal to me, and you represent that to me here tonight. John is always John. I'm sorry there's now only one John in the library. I remember when there were 2, and I like them both. John Bax is now in another place. So it's easy for one person here to trigger memories of many other people who I've known here as well. So I appreciate all of you being here and for triggering all those fine memories. I can't imagine how patient you've been to listen to my stories told by all these friends of mine over the years. I'm so thankful they didn't tell you everything they know. Jamie's heard many of these things, although I saw a look of surprise in her face a couple times this evening, so we may have a late night conversation. Francis was very kind not to mention anything about that person who was stranded in a tent with me that night. But Jamie did know about Lloyd and I. So. The people I've had an opportunity to work with, most recently in administrative computing and through the subtle ways of Shoreline, the people in instructional computing as well have been my colleagues, and I appreciate folks in instructional computing and certainly those who worked with me in the years of administrative computing. It's a fine crew. They seem to function just fine without me. I don't know what that means, but I'm glad to see it. It's the database that's in charge. I think Harry's got it right. All the union activities, they've been in forced retirement, of course, in my non-union position the last 10 years. But I do remember those very well, and I have a list. John provided me a list of all the faculty members who were on the charter of the Federation for the faculty at Shoreline. I was going to read it, but it's too long. But I'll leave it up here, and those of you interested in a little union history might want to look at that and see the names of some of those who were in the early days. We had to run 2 elections. The first election we failed, the second election we won. And that was the beginning of a good career for the Federation here at Shoreline. Math teaching was what brought me here first, and my collegial relationship with Carl and Howard and Judy and all the others over the years have been magnificent, and I've really appreciated that as well. But it's the work of the college. I was glad to hear that I was remembered for attending the students, because I think that's what this college does best. We also attend to each other, and I felt well attended to by my friends at Shoreline, and I hope that I've been able to do the same for you. So I really want to thank you for this event. I'm glad to be the excuse for a party. I'm understanding that when I sit down, the party's not over, but the party's just beginning tonight. And I'm glad that's the arrangement, because Shoreline has much to celebrate, both its history and its future. There's a lot of new leadership at Shoreline, and there's a lot that's unclear about the future of Shoreline, and that's opportunity. It's real opportunity, and I think you can find it. People at Shoreline will do a magnificent job, as they always have. No one can predict the future. You have to create it. And I see Pat Portalese here, and I just have to say something about CTC. After I got tired of driving presidents crazy here, they sent me after the CTC. And there are a couple of my colleagues from those days, those adventures. Chris is here, was at Skagit, and Vicki was here. I don't locate her right now. There's Vicki. My irksome colleagues and I sallied forth in many ways to and with the CTC. And Pat Portlees has been one of the stalwarts from the very first days of that organization and continuing on now. And my association with CTC, rocky, contentious, or cooperative, as it was in its season, was a real important part of the computer part of my career in the community college system. And I appreciate all the fine people at CTC as well. Just a larger circle, and that's what I found about the community college system as a whole. The circle enlarges, and the circle is one of trust and friendship and support. That's what I've always felt at Shoreline and what I've appreciated most of all. Thank you very much.
Bonnie Madison said it in her email, ain't nothing but a party. Carolyn Weiss, where are you?